Hi, welcome back to our podcast, The Blend Effect. I'm Radhika.
And I'm Sayli.
And today we're going to be talking about
Racism.
All right.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy topic, but we'll try to keep it light.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I believe.
So I think what we'll do is that first we will start off with a game, like we always do, play a little game. And so in this game, I'm going to ask you a few statements and you're going to complete the sentence.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there will be like a fill in the blank portion.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay. Microaggression number 1.
Okay.
You speak blank so well.
English.
Yeah. Where are you blank?
From?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. You must be so good at blank dancing.
Bollywood.
Yeah. Or Bhangra.
Yeah.
Go back to
where you came from?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Your food smells like
curry.
And does your dad wear a
turban? Yes. See, I think we've gotten these so often that
I know we just know them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think that racism comes in multiple forms, right?
Yes,
it comes as just a blatant racism.
Yeah. And
then it also comes in the form of microaggressions where people make assumptions about us.
Yeah.
And then they say things which, maybe we're not good at Bollywood dancing.
Yeah.
Or maybe we are good at Bollywood dancing, or whatever it may be. So, so did you want to maybe start off by sharing some examples of racism that you may have faced?
Yeah, so, growing up in a small town, just outside of Toronto, which at that time, as I, mentioned a couple episodes ago, there were no Indians, right? So there was no awareness at all. And we definitely did feel very much like the outsider in, a lot of different situations and just kind of, places that we lived or, whatnot. So one of the experiences that really stood out for me, and I think definitely today I feel like it hits me harder because I was only 5 when it happened, so maybe I didn't think too much about it. But when I actually found out about it from my parents later on, now thinking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so hurtful. So we lived in an apartment when I was about 5 or 6, and one day some kids, I assume they were probably not Indian, came to our door and had taken this green crayon and they wrote on the door Paki, like P-A-K-I. And at the time, we weren't really sure. I think my parents weren't really sure what it meant, and they basically just erased the crayon and just kind of moved on. And thinking back to things now, and I'm sure didn't tell us because we were so little at that time, and thinking back to when I heard the story later on, like when I was in middle school or high school, I remember thinking, oh, well, why didn't you go to the building management, or why didn't you ask them to look on their cameras and see who had done this? But they were just like, no, it was done and it was probably offensive and hurtful, but we just wiped it off and just went our way. Which kind of shows the resilience that our parents had. Because today, if someone had done that to me, I would have been looking on our Ring camera and figuring out who did it, asking my neighbors.
Calling the cops.
Exactly, right? But again, our parents just tried to stay away from whatever maybe they thought was danger. Maybe they thought they were going to come back and hurt us or something had they done something about it. So it's hard, right? It's hard hearing that. It's hard with people thinking that, the stereotype about, Pakistan, and India, and, we weren't even from there, right? But it's hard to see how people had mixed those two up.
And it's also interesting because was that supposed to be an insult?
Well, that's the thing.
And the other part of it being, they wrote Paki, but it's most of the racism or micro racism that occurs is essentially the Western world assuming everyone's Indian.
Right, yeah.
So, so for them to then go out of their way to write Paki on your door is is that supposed to be an insult? Where did you come up with that from?
Right, exactly. Or just not knowing the difference, or maybe thinking people were from, Pakistan, but when they were from India, it's really when I think back, it's I have no idea. But it was clearly a targeted thing, and it was clearly hurtful.
Right.
But I just don't, but you're so right, is it's even if we were from Pakistan, that's still insulting. You're writing that, right? Whatever they wrote, it's still insulting.
Right. So had they written that on other doors?
No,
or it was just yours?
Just ours. Just
ours.
But
there are no other Indians in your
exactly.
community.
Again, just thinking back, sure, maybe those people might not have gotten caught or got in trouble, but I would have today gone to the building management and tried to find out.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
I think my other question then is, in Canada, was there something going on that had an anti-Indian or anti-brown people or Pakistani movement?
No, not that I like know about, and later on when I tried to look it up, like I don't think there was anything specifically at that time. But you know, it was, and now I don't hear that term so much, but I do remember growing up that like a lot of other Indian people who we later came to know, like they were called Pakis. And I don't know why, but I guess that was the
Is there
term.
a large like Pakistani immigration to
you
that
know,
part
it's
of Canada?
interesting. At that time, there wasn't. I think more of the migration actually happened after 9/11.
Oh, okay.
Because I think there was so much anti-Muslim rhetoric in the States that a lot of people did end up moving
Came
to
over
Canada.
there.
Right.
Got it.
But it's funny because in the last 15 years, I haven't heard that term. Like in the last 20 years, it was like 30 something years ago that was like going on. I think it just shows ignorance. Right?
It really does.
It does show ignorance, and just because you have like brown skin, like you know, some
you must all be from one part of somewhere.
You know, and that term itself is so derogatory, even from anybody who is from Pakistan or India or anywhere. It's just such a such a derogatory term. But I think the point is, it was open. That is open racism. That's not microaggression. That's clearly aggression, right? Like, and there was nothing like this. We just didn't do anything about it.
Right. And it is, I think a lot of racism comes from ignorance, right?
Yeah.
Because these people don't want to have an open mind. Yeah. And to not just these people, I think everyone's a little racist. Yeah. Every culture is a little racist, you know, but a lot of that racism does stem from just either thinking you're better than someone else or just being ignorant about somebody else's, you know, background. Right. And unfortunately, when you migrate to another country, you are at a higher risk of facing those things. Yeah, so it's exactly. But you said this was before 9/11.
Oh yeah, this was in like 1994 or something like that. I don't know. So much before 9/11. But I guess maybe because we're on like the kind of got to the 9/11 topic because of like the anti-Muslim rhetoric. I was curious. You know, I didn't live in the States at that time, and you did, and I know that there was, anyways, a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric even in Canada after that happened. Even though it didn't happen in Canada, there was still a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric. It was so close, though. Right, exactly, right? And I'm kind of curious, did you have any experiences at that time?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was in 6th grade when this happened. So, you know, little 11-year-old.
Yeah, okay.
And I remember that morning vividly because I had walked out into the living room at around 6 a.m. or so. I was always an early riser.
Right, yeah.
And my dad was watching TV just horrified. You know, he's watching the screen and I was like, what happened? And I turned to look and of course, you know, you see the planes. And I remember just, you know, I was too young to understand the depth of what had happened. I understood that something bad had happened, but I was, I didn't really realize it until I went to school that morning. Right. And I went to school and you remember the girl from 5th grade who was hitting on my button? Yeah. Same girl.
Okay.
Oh man, same girl. Like I said, I don't know if she was like my best friend or my worst hater.
Yeah.
But she and I actually sat at the same desk space. You know, we had 4 desks put together. And so she faced me and she came in really angry and I sat down, she sat down and she looks at me and the first thing out of her mouth to me that morning is, you should just go back to where you came from.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember being so confused about this statement because I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
That was the first time I had to ask myself that, you know, what does that mean? Does she mean to go back to India because I'm Indian?
Right.
But that doesn't make sense because I'm from Michigan.
Right. Exactly. Right.
So what does that mean? And she just had so much anger. And I just remember thinking, well, I have the same anger in me because I'm an American too.
Right. Exactly.
I'm angry that somebody like hurt our country.
Right.
You know? So what really is the difference between her and I? And that was the first time that I really felt that like racial separation divide. Yeah. So that sucked. And then the second thing being that was very confusing was not that even if I was Muslim, this shouldn't be the target or the things that are said, but I just remember being confused because I was like, why are you angry at me?
Yeah.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
My family didn't do anything.
Yeah.
My people didn't do anything.
Yeah.
you know? So just, again, clumping every brown person together. And it's funny because there's so many people out there of different religions who don't even fit a look stereotype. Yeah. Yeah. You know? So I think the question just came to my head at that point that, what do you mean? Yeah. That was the first time that I think I was hit with blatant racism. Yeah. And, you know, the few days after that, I think I was awoken.
Yeah.
Because we start reading news stories
Yeah.
of the Sikh uncle who was taking a walk and, you know, killed because
Yeah.
on his walk
Yeah.
to wherever around the neighborhood. Or I think there was somebody in New York who was pushed into a subway because they were brown, essentially. And then I think that fear started coming out of, oh my gosh, what if somebody tries to hurt us now?
Yeah.
You know, just because we look like what they think attacked the World
US.
Trade
Yeah.
Center,
Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah. Wow. That's difficult. I think even in Canada at that time, there was definitely racist rhetoric for sure. But it just, you know, Canada has always sort of been pretty separate, and we've tried to stay separate intentionally. So definitely not to that level. And I think I was, again, lucky I didn't necessarily experience anything after 9/11, but I can't even imagine, like, you know, being in 6th grade and someone telling you, like, oh, it's your country. Kind of on a lighter note, with some of the other ones that we had, they're a little bit kind of more on the funny side. Have you ever had like someone like make fun of your food or?
Well, yeah. I mean, make fun of it, I guess,
or
of
be
course.
racist. Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, like, I had this experience one time where we had some, like, you know, Canadians, like, you know, blonde hair, blue eyes Canadians, like, you know, they were visiting our home one time. They were in our basement or whatever. They were like friends of friends, and, you know, they came home. You know, they came to our house, and the mom said to me, "Oh, you know," she's like, "Are you guys from India?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Do you guys eat curry a lot?" And I was kind of like, "Actually, nahi, hame proper pori bhaji khata. We're not eating these curries." I was like sometimes. And she's like, "Well, I just wanted to tell you, like, your house smells like curry." And what was so funny is, like, the day that she came over, like, we hadn't even cooked anything Indian, like, in 3 days. So there was just no way it, like, smelled like curry, you know?
Right.
But, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." You know, I was like, we haven't even, like, cooked anything, like, curry-like or Indian-like in, like, a few days. And I think before that we had eaten out. So it was just not possible, you know? And she was like, no, she's like, actually, she was like, "I'm a realtor. And, like, when I show houses, she's like, I know, like, these houses smell like curry. It's actually, like, built into your walls almost." And I was like, what?
You know, and even if that was true, here's my question. Why do you have the guts to walk into my house and say that to my face?
Exactly,
you know?
right? And I was like, oh my gosh. And by the way, this was like 2015. So this is only like 10 years ago. So I was like, even up to 10 years ago, people were that blatantly racist. I was like, oh my goodness, I am not, you know, but
I think that's the part that bothers me so much. And again, because we're moms, I think the topic is always going to go back to our children. I so want to build my child up in a way, or bring my child up in a way where she will be so confident in who she is, that if she's hearing these remarks, she's able to respond to them. Because I don't know about you, but I was a deer in headlights so many times.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right?
Like, I mean, I was like stumped. I was like, first I was trying to defend, like, gosh, we haven't cooked anything. But like when she said it's like stuck in the walls, first of all, I was thinking, gosh, like, how uneducated and how uninformed are you? Like, you don't even know how you sound. But I was also kind of like, do I even want to get into it with this person? Like, she was only going to be there like for an hour. She left, and I was like, I'm just, you know.
But I mean, a lot of that is the lack of confidence that we are almost brought up with, not as immigrant children. You know, I'm saying the whole Indian subcontinent. I feel like, don't you see at the last time we talked about wearing Indian clothes in public, right? But how many times do we see Muslim women out in public wearing their attire? And they're so confident about it. You know, or you have certain, you know, factions of Christianity going door to door, knocking on doors, saying, you know, hey, this is our religion. Everybody is so confident about who they are. We're not.
No, we're not. And I think that has a little bit to do probably with just, and I don't want to get into like the religion topic, but you know, right? I think it has a little bit to do with like Hinduism just as a religion, not being overtly pushy or, you know, not imposing our views on anyone. But even just like the whole Indian thing is we always try to stay very cool, very neutral, like, you know, if we want to show off our culture, we do. But if we don't, we're also a little bit afraid or hesitant to do it.
Exactly.
Which is, some ways I feel like it's like kind of good that we're not over the top or, you know, sometimes. But sometimes I do wish, like, in these situations, we felt a little bit better and we're like, it's okay. I can like stand up to this person. Or I can go investigate this, you know, situation of someone writing on our door. But we just don't, right? And again, I think this goes back to the whole point of this, is that the situations that we were raised in, the way our parents raised us, it was just always about laying low.
But I
not
think that's
getting
the
in
way
trouble.
they were raised too.
Right, like, not
so-
getting in trouble. And especially that in a foreign country for that matter.
Exactly.
So it's tough. And I think today, if like my daughter was to face any of these things, I would be right there telling her, this is wrong, you're going to handle it this way. But
exactly.
they just didn't do that, right?
Right. Well, and I think, again, going back to what bothers me is that if this woman had walked into, let's say, a Muslim person's house, would she have the guts to make a comment?
That's exactly what it
an
is.
anti-Muslim comment? Or if she had walked into just anyone else's house, people don't say these things. Right. So why is it okay to walk into an Indian person's house and make these comments? Yeah. Because we're not confident enough to defend ourselves, And I'm not saying that we should go and get into fights with these people.
Right. Yeah.
But what I am saying is, how do we build a society for ourselves or a community where, people will respect us and not, come in and feel comfortable just saying whatever they want. Yeah. Even just mimicking the Indian accent or whatever it may be. People do it so easily. They'll come out and just, be like, say something as a joke, and then everyone just laughs about it and we laugh about it. Yeah. But under some circumstances, it's not even funny.
No, it's really not. And sometimes you're doing like a really bad job of mimicking it too.
I mean, I have never seen someone go out and mimic, like, as a general joke to make fun of a culture, the Russian accent or the British accent or any sort of, any other
Australian
country,
accent, whatever.
Accent. Like, I just don't see people going out and making fun of these things the way they do the Indian accent. Yeah. So, and all of these things are, while they're not overtly racist, they are microaggressions. And it is difficult sometimes. Yeah.
But I do wonder, Sally, if that is the case, is because, and again, I don't want to like just bring it back to our parents, but even that whole generation of immigrants who came here, I really wonder if that is a lot about all of those people not wanting to speak up, all of those people flying under the radar, all of those people, which like maybe they don't think it's funny, but I think like my parents probably laughed at those jokes, even though they like didn't think it was funny sometimes, but they just kind of did it maybe like to fit in. And to be honest, maybe I kind of did that at times too.
Yeah,
like,
or just to not have an awkward
just
situation.
Not get into it, like, oh, haha, like that's funny. Like maybe it really wasn't thinking back now. Yeah. But it's hard, right? Because I think now we realize, guys, this is racism. Right. This is not funny. This is targeted racism. Like,
well, yeah, and again, why are people so comfortable? So I actually just thought of another story while we're talking. Just a few months ago, believe it or not, we were sitting there and we were talking about food, and I was just like, oh yeah, I'm vegetarian. You know, we weren't even necessarily talking about Indian food. But, being Indian, people will say, they know that we don't eat beef or whatever, generally. So I was just talking about how I am a vegetarian, and one girl who is, I guess she was like Muslim or something. So one girl, she comes up to me with her food and she goes, look, I'm eating beef. Look, I'm eating beef. And she's shoving it into my face.
Like a recent incident?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Within the past year.
Yeah.
And I, even today, was initially shocked. You know, I froze and I was like, oh man, how do I react to this? Yeah. And it took me a few seconds to recover. Yeah. And I hated that. Yeah. And I didn't say anything to her, and I was just like, okay, whatever. But I wish I had turned to her and just been like, am I shoving pork into your face?
Right. Exactly. Right.
Is it okay for you to shove your beef into my face?
Yeah, exactly. That's awful. And it is so interesting, right? That as much as we talk about the world moving forward and all this awareness, and there's all this rhetoric now on, being anti-racist, like all these things, right? But still, there are people who think it's okay to do this. Yeah. And so I don't know, but to me, it feels like this has just been ingrained, part of us growing up, right? Like there was always some incident here or some incident there where we were like, outrightly, people were racist towards us, and we just dealt with it.
Yeah. And the problem is that this isn't the end of it, right? No. These things are going to continue happening for as long as humanity or humankind exists. Yeah. So I guess my question then to that is, since racism isn't going away, there might be fluctuating levels of racism through time. Yeah. What is your takeaway?
What's interesting is I think my takeaway is now that I feel more comfortable saying something even than I did like 10 years ago. Yeah. I think now I'm probably not afraid to say like that's wrong. Yeah. And you should probably educate yourselves, and that's not how things are. Right. I will say I might be a little picky with like maybe who I say it to or what situation I'm in or how safe I feel or whatnot. But I think now I'm finally now at like, 37 years old, I finally now feel that it's okay to stand up for yourself.
Right.
And no one is gonna, do something terrible to you or get you arrested for standing up or, get in trouble with the law or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's okay to stand up. And it's okay to tell the other person that something is wrong, right? Which growing up as an immigrant kid, oh boy, that was not the situation at all. This is like at 37 years old, I finally feel comfortable doing this. Although I will say, and this is kind of a more lighter take on this, living in the Bay Area today, I will say it's a little bit more comfortable here. In that maybe I'm not as afraid of speaking up, maybe because I feel like there's more of us almost, I feel like. But maybe, was this the case that I was still living in this town where there were only like no Indian people? I wonder if that would have changed.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think my takeaway from this is the same thing I just said.
Yeah.
How do we build a more confident future society?
Exactly.
How do we raise our children to be just as confident as all these other people are?
Yeah.
Because there's not really any reason for people to be discriminating or racist towards us.
Yeah.
Other than just, they just don't like us or whatever it may be. But even if you don't like us, you don't have to be mean or out loud verbal about it to us.
Exactly.
So that's my takeaway.
Yeah. And I think now the other takeaway this too, Sayli, is about, raising our own kids is like, and even, a lot of our friends who are born and brought up in India and are now like, living the kind of immigrant life here. Of course, it's a different immigrant life than than what our parents went through. But I would always say, and I always feel like I'm saying this more nowadays, is like, don't be afraid, right? Don't be afraid to speak up, right? You're not going to get in trouble for doing something right. You're not going to, get in trouble like for nonviolence. Like, don't be afraid to speak up, right? There's nothing wrong with it. And in retrospect, again, I wish I had done it more. I wish I was felt more confident to do it more. But I'm hoping that you all kind of listen to this and feel like, we don't want you to have to go through the same thing. So it's totally okay to speak up.
Totally. So
I think that was a good discussion. We wanted to keep it kind of light on a heavy topic. So hopefully we were able to do that.
Yeah.
So I think if you guys have more suggestions or want to hear more about this, send us a DM or, drop a comment in our comment box. And as always, like, share, subscribe.
Yes.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Yes, we will see you guys next time.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.